Hello, namaste. Welcome back to Bhagavatam for Rationalists. In this episode, we are going to meet Jaya and Vijaya, who were the gatekeepers of Vishnu. So, we will also meet four sages who are called the sons of mind of Brahma. And with them, we'll begin a long story arc which starts in this episode and goes almost all the way to the end of Bhagavatam. So, Brahma can be thought of as a son of Vishnu because Vishnu, you remember when we described him, has a lotus coming out of his navel. So, Vishnu is supposed to have willed this lotus from his navel, and that's why he's called a Padmanabha. And inside that navel, he also willed for Brahma to be created. So, after he was created, Brahma thought long and hard for a long time and wondered what Vishnu wanted from him and decided what he wanted. What Vishnu wanted was the creation of the universe, so Brahma created the whole universe. Soon after that, though, Brahma started thinking, well, I did what the Lord wanted. What do I want? And he wanted to create what has become known as Koumara Avatar. That is a quartet of sages, four sages whose names are Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanat Kumara, and Sanat Sujata. So these four sages are called the sons of mind or Manasa Putras of Brahma. And because they were created soon after the universe was created, they are ancient in the extreme. However, in spite of being old, they always look like 5-year-old boys. And they are great rishis, have enormous penance power. So they are able to reach and see Vishnu at will at any time they want. Once, when they were coming to see Vishnu, Vishnu's gatekeepers, that's Jaya and Vijaya, blocked them. And the Kaumaras, upon being blocked, got very angry. And because they were angry, they hurled a curse at Jaya and Vijaya. And they said, you will go and be born on earth for 3 separate Janmas. Okay. So in the first Janma, Jaya and Vijaya were born as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. In the second birth as Ravana and Kumbhakarna. And in the third birth as Shishupala and Dantavaktra. So these six are the three births of Jaya and Vijaya in three different births. And those six have been killed by four different avatars of Vishnu. And having been killed, having served, having completed the third Janma of Shishupala and Dantavaktra, they have served their curse. And so now Jaya and Vijaya are back with Lord Vishnu guarding his gates in Vaikuntham. Whenever you go to a Vishnu temple, as you see in this Chennakeshava temple in Belur, it's a 12th century temple. You have this door to the sanctum sanctorum in the middle, and guarding that door on the two sides, you have Jaya and Vijaya. Now, there is a sort of a significance to this. If you think about the story we've told so far, it's actually a metaphor for a very important message. So, Manasaputras, the quartet of sages, this great penance power and so forth, nevertheless, they have arrogance and anger, wouldn't you say? Because they come to see Lord Vishnu himself, and when they are blocked, they don't humbly say, oh, the Lord is busy, that's all right, I'll sit and wait. They get angry, they get furious, and they hurl curses at the gatekeepers. That shows, even if you have a great deal of penance power and a lot of piety, you still have things like anger and arrogance in your hearts. So, putting Jaya and Vijaya to the two sides of the sanctum sanctorum, the gates, is to remind us of that and to tell us, look, we also have anger, arrogance, hatred, and all these kinds of dirty thoughts and feelings in our hearts. If we go in and see God with that, we will have no result from having seen God. Whereas if we check it at the door and go inside with as clean a heart as we can, that is when we benefit from having seen God. So you might imagine that if we go into a high security environment like meeting a VIP or even getting onto an airplane nowadays, They check us, they check our bags and so forth, for weapons and things like that. Jaya and Vijaya are standing outside the gates of Vishnu, not to check for weapons, but to check for our emotions, and telling us to control those negative emotions before we go and see God, so that we may have the full power, the full result of witnessing and seeing, getting God's darshan. All right. In order to get back to the story, let's also discuss what is known as gods and demons. These are half brothers. They have the same father, is known as Kashyapa Prajapati, but they have two different mothers, Diti and Aditi, who were the two wives of Kashyapa Prajapati. So Aditi, her sons and that lineage are considered gods. In honor of Aditi, they are called Adityas. They are also called Devas or Suras because they are famous for Surapanam or drinking Sura. Generally considered good, although we'll see them doing corrupt and unsavory things in some stories. They're called Amaras, as in without death, so they do live for a very long time. And if you think about examples of Devas, you see Agni, the god of fire, Vayu, the god of wind, Varuna, the god of water, the various planets, and Yama, the god of death. When we go to the other side, we have the lineage of Diti, the other wife of Kashyapa, and that lineage are called Daityas in honor of Diti, or Vana or Danavas, or they are called Asuras as opposed to Suras on the Deva side. Generally considered bad or evil, but there are some extremely honorable and respectable characters on the Daitya lineage as well. They're also called Rakshasas, and some examples of it, they always get Asura as an affix on their name, like Murasura, Kaitabhasura, Narakasura, Ravanasura, and so forth. Now, Jaya and Vijaya are to take three births in this lineage. And before I forget, I might also mention that the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva are typically considered on the Deva side, even though they are not really the lineage of Aditi. They are, in fact, the lords of the Devas themselves. All right. So, in the curse of the quartet, Jaya and Vijaya are supposed to take three births on earth, and they have taken birth as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Let's talk about the first one, Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha was a very powerful, he performed a very powerful penance, and he received a boon from Brahma, and that boon was to be invincible by humans and gods. Of course, if he was invincible, he could do anything he wanted, so he occupied all three worlds. On earth, of course, there was no one to oppose him. He went to Devalokam, the world of the gods, and Devas themselves went into hiding because they could not face him. He was invincible to them. And then he went to the sea and made huge waves. అమరారి విపుల నిశ్వాసములన్ ప్రభవించినట్టి జలనిధి కల్లోలములను విపుల గదాదండమునంబో నడిచే అతి దృఢంబగు శక్తిన్. So the enemy of the Devas, namely Hiranyaksha, was just huffing and puffing with his breath. And just with that breath, he created huge turmoil in the ocean. As if to suppress that turmoil, he hit it strongly with his mace, but that only just increased even more in the turmoil. Because of that turmoil, it is said that the ocean swelled up and drowned the entire earth. So, this is often a picture that is talked about when we talk about Hiranyaksha, that he actually drowned the whole earth in the ocean. Of course, he was also a Vishnu hater. That means he tormented the devotees of Vishnu, and anyone who was doing any worship or puja to Vishnu, he would torment them, have extreme religious intolerance about that. It is said that he also tried to drown the Vedas. He stole the Vedas and tried to drown them in the ocean as well. So Varaha Avataram came down to earth because Varuna, the water god, he lives in the ocean, of course, because he is a water god. He is supposed to have said that only Vishnu is capable of giving Hiranyaksha a good fight. He's the only one who can fight with him on an equal term. Having heard about this, Hiranyaksha says, who's that Vishnu? Let him come in front of me. And he starts looking around. So Vishnu then comes down as an avatar of Varaha and kills Hiranyaksha. This Varaha Avataram is depicted in many places in paintings and sculptures and so on. This ancient sculpture from Mahabalipuram sees Varaha in a kind of a humani form, and he is lifting the earth. Because remember, we said Hiranyaksha is supposed to have drowned the earth itself, and often the way it's depicted by artists is to say that Varaha has uplifted the earth. He has removed the earth from the ocean so that she can live and breathe. And you see the same thing in this Hoysaleshwar temple from 12th century in Halebeedu. You have Varaha lifting up Mother Earth on his tusks and on his arms, and he's crushing Hiranyaksha under his feet. Now, Varaha, if you think about it just as an animal, is Sus scrofa. It's a very fierce animal with a very thick hide. It's about as big as a small elephant and very powerful. So it's not difficult to imagine that a man would be killed by a Varaha. So one of the things you might say is the way it is described, as in Varaha picking up a mace and talking to Hiranyaksha and getting into a fight with him and killing him, even if you don't want to buy into that picturization, you would still say this Varaha was an avatar of God. Why is that? Because Hiranyaksha was a cruel tyrant. He was killed, even if you think it was just by a wild animal when he went for a hunt or something, you would still say it's an avatar because people, after being relieved of his tyranny, say God himself has come down as that Varaha and has killed Hiranyaksha to help us. So, if God himself came down in the form of a wild boar, well, the two conditions we set down for an avatar, that they should have great accomplishment and have recognition for those great accomplishments, both of those conditions are fulfilled. So, this animal also is then an avatar of Vishnu based on our definition so far. So, Varaha Avataram also is called a Kshipra Avataram, or a avatar that is only visible for a short period of time. The avatars we've discussed before this were full lifetimes. Even if we discuss them in only brief terms by talking for just 1 or 2 minutes about what their accomplishments were, they did in fact live a full lifetime and did all those great accomplishments. So Kshipra avatars are different. They are only visible for a brief period of time to accomplish one brief great act, and this is what Varaha did. As an analogy, in a real life, you might imagine that you are in some strange city, not knowing where you are, not knowing what to do, and you get into some sort of a trouble. And imagine that some stranger unexpectedly and suddenly walks up to you, sympathizes with you, and he says, "Oh, I can help you," and he helps you out of that trouble. So you might never see that person again in your life. You might then think, oh, God Himself has come down in the form of this stranger to help me out when I'm in trouble. That is the nature of Kshipra avatars, and Varaha avataram is a Kshipra avataram. Now, we covered Hiranyaksha, and in that first birth of Jaya and Vijaya, the other brother is Hiranyakashipu. And we are going to cover his tyranny as well as his downfall next. We'll start that in the next episode. It'll go on for a couple of more episodes after that. And I just want to say these have probably the most melodious poetry in all of literature, and I can't wait to share them with you. It's wonderful, singing and poetry. uh, Really, you will enjoy it if you were to be there. I really hope to see you there. We'll start that in the next episode. Thank you very much for your attention so far. See you with the history of Hiranyakashipu and the history of Prahlada starting in the next episode. Thank you very much.